The extraordinary variety of plants and animals on Earth make our planet unique. In its harmony and balance, the spectacle of nature is born of an age-old evolution that has endured almost as long as the Earth itself. To date, scientists have discovered nearly 2 million species. But this represents only 15% of life on Earth. Huge swaths of this planet's biodiversity are completely unknown, especially in our forests and oceans. Biodiversity produces oxygen, provides food for plants and animals, and helps to purify the soil and water. Our forests and oceans play an essential role in regulating climate, allowing billions of organisms to celebrate life on Earth. But this fragile balance is threatened.
Our lives depend on biological diversity. Species and ecosystems are disappearing at an unsustainable rate. We humans are the cause. We stand to lose a wide variety of environmental goods and services that we take for granted.
Researchers believe that the Earth is undergoing one of the most significant mass extinction events in its history, caused by our civilization. Our expansion is affecting the ecosystems of all other species.
We are changing our world, and species are disappearing.
As humans, we can have a drastic effect on this planet. We can't just do things and not think about the long-term consequences.
It's a serious issue. We need to change minds and change attitudes towards nature.
Human impact on biodiversity has greatly increased since the start of the Industrial Revolution during the 18th century. Massive technological and economic development have driven the expansion of our civilization across the planet. The Earth's population has grown from 700 million to 7 billion in less than 300 years. Worldwide, humanity has become a phenomenal force. Greenhouse gas levels have not been this high for over 1 million years. We have stripped large predators of their territories by confining them to reserves or by destroying the world's large forests. All over the Earth, plants and animals are increasingly struggling to coexist with humanity. Every day, nearly 130 species go extinct, probably one of the highest rates of extinction the Earth has ever seen. For several years, the oceanographic schooner Sedna 4 has been sailing the world's oceans. After expeditions in the Arctic and Antarctic, its crew has now embarked on a 3-year voyage around the world. During their mission, 1,000 days for the planet, they will meet with scientists who have dedicated their lives to protecting biodiversity. Mission leader, Jean Lemire.
We set sail for Central America, a region with one of the highest diversity of species in the world. The preservation of habitats here is vital to the survival of thousands of species of fish, reptiles, and mammals. Here, the many shapes and bright colors of biodiversity stimulate our desire to protect them even more.
In Costa Rica, the team sets off in search of one of the last big cats of the Americas. These top predators in the food chain help control populations in their ecosystems. Scientists call the jaguar an umbrella species. By protecting it, the balance among all the other species that share its habitat is also protected. Unfortunately, the jaguar is threatened. Humans hunt its prey, and farms, ranches, and ever-expanding urbanization are fragmenting its territory. In less than a century, the jaguar's habitat has been cut in half. Today, it is confined to pockets of land that are becoming smaller and smaller. Maintaining connections among these pockets of land is essential to the genetic health of the species, because jaguars are part of a single extended family that stretches from Mexico to Argentina. In eastern Costa Rica, a reserve has been created to protect one of the jaguar's habitats. This is a private reserve that regularly attracts scientists such as biologists Jose Gonzalez and Jan Schipper. They have dedicated their lives to protecting these big cats.
Nice spot.
Yeah. Ah, look at there, look at there.
Oh, yeah.
Those are jaguar marks.
Wow, even there.
All the way up.
So that's a good spot for jaguar.
This is a perfect spot. Yeah. This is the place we're shooting.
A jaguar has marked its territory by scratching a tree.
Get sunlight direct to it, and then lock.
Installing a motion sensing camera will record the passage of jaguars and photo ID them. Using photographs over several years, researchers have shown that the reserve is frequented by about 14 jaguars. And videos highlight the problem of jaguars coexisting with local farmers.
Oh, look at that.
What's this?
That's definitely a cow, and that looks like Cora.
Yeah, that's Cora, for sure. That's amazing.
That's amazing. Wow, see the power in his jaws?
Wow. With the strength of the animal.
Yeah. So I suppose that, you know, when a jaguar cut a cow like this, it brings lots of conflict.
Yeah, that's the basis for conflict, people hunting jaguars in revenge. But on the other side, it is also a consequence of problems because people is hunting the prey base. So that's why they go out and hunt cattle, because they don't have anything else to eat.
Jaguars are more and more threatened because the increased conversion of virgin forest into livestock pasture reduces the prey available to them. The reserve has an area of about 100 square kilometers, which is not enough to support the jaguar population. Today, the reserve is bordered by a nearly continuous succession of pastures and cattle farms. The jaguars find it difficult to move among the isolated pockets of forest.
You can see there's only little patches here and there of forest with agriculture, clear-cut areas for cattle and so forth. Pastures obviously has very little value in terms of a jaguar being able to cross. So we don't necessarily need continuous virgin forest from here to the coast. We just need a mix of forest types along with different types of more sustainable agriculture to connect it. And that's a lot easier to sell that to landowners instead of saying, oh, we need to take your land away and put it in conservation.
The challenge for scientists is to protect the jaguars when they leave the reserve's boundaries. To do so, they must establish migration corridors. In this way, they hope to convince farmers to preserve sections of forest on their land that allow the big cats and their prey to move about their territory. But first, they must capture one.
We use some pheromones to attract the animals.
By equipping a jaguar with a tracking collar, the scientists will be able to precisely monitor its movements.
And this is the trap. So it has a little mechanism like right in the bottom. We're gonna check it right now just to see if it's working fine. If jaguars disappear, what we're gonna see is just overabundance of many other species, probably changing entirely what we know as biodiversity right now. So it's a huge change that is gonna occur. That probably also works when you don't have sharks in the sea. The entire community changes.
Large predators are threatened all over the world, both on land and in the ocean. In recent decades, populations of sharks, tuna, and swordfish have declined by 90% around the world. During this same period, fishing intensity has increased dramatically. More and more, ecosystems are suffering the consequences of this overexploitation. In the coral reefs of the Caribbean, large predators are increasingly rare, which has weakened ecosystems and opened up a niche for an invasive species. The lionfish. Biologist Tim Pusak of the University of Oregon has studied this phenomenon for many years.
So lionfish that naturally live in the Indo-Pacific have been taken from their home by humans, brought over to the US because people like to have them in their aquariums. They're beautiful, stunning fish. It's great to look at them. The problem is they like to eat, and they like to eat a lot. So they'll tend to eat all the other fish that are in the aquarium, and so people just release it into the ocean.
Lionfish have begun to proliferate in Caribbean waters. Genetic studies show that the population began with only 6 individuals. Scientists are now studying the consequences of their presence in the food chain.
It appears that they can eat prey items that are up to about half their body size, which is rather large. They eat every and anything they can get their mouth on. Studies have found that a single lionfish could reduce the number of small coral reef fish by about 90%, so they're having a drastic effect, much greater than any native fish would have.
The smaller fish eaten by the lionfish generally consume large amounts of algae. With no fish left to eat the algae, they proliferate to the point where they suffocate the reef. The lionfish adapted quickly to its new habitat, and this fierce predator has taken advantage of the weakened ecosystems.
Populations exploded since the 1990s and now extend throughout the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, up the eastern seaboard of the US, and working their way down the coast of South America.
The remarkable adaptation of this invasive species to its new environment, combined with the overfishing of large fish, has weakened the health of coral reefs in the Caribbean. Panama has not been spared the influx of invasive species, which are weakening some of the world's richest ecosystems. These ecosystems are home to nearly 50% of the world's amphibian species. Frogs occupy one of the most important niches in the food chain. They consume large amounts of harmful insects and serve as food themselves for many species of reptiles, birds, and fish. In the field of medicine, they have also led to the development of antibiotics and are important in cancer research. Over the past 250 million years, they have withstood many catastrophes affecting life on Earth. But today, frogs are in trouble. A mysterious disease is attacking them where their numbers are highest. To make matters worse, these frogs are also weakened by insecticides and habitat loss. In just a few years, over 100 species have gone extinct. A few years ago, biologist Edgardo Griffith used to come to this river to study frogs.
I used to find 56 species of frogs around this stream alone. And now can't hear anything, really, you know.
The cause of this sharp decline? An invasive species. A mysterious fungus called chytrid has invaded the rivers of Panama's mountains.
The fungus arrived in 2005, killed 90% of the amphibian community, and in some cases 100% of the individuals of certain species. Came, kill, stay, and at the same time it's moving eastward, but it's also coming up from South America.
Found in Mexico as early as 1972, the disease spread to Central America. Other infection sites have been found all over the world. Today, over a third of the world's 6,000 known amphibian species are threatened with extinction.
To me, I used to be a field biologist. Now I think I'm like an extinction biologist.
For scientists, time is running out. Edgardo and his colleagues are trying to capture living frogs in the hopes of learning more about the disease. They organize regular searches in Panama's rivers. Chytrid is spreading at a rate of over 30 kilometers per year. Scientists are trying to understand how it spreads from region to region. When a species nears extinction in nature, scientists often have no other choice but to remove the few survivors from the wild.
This one might be one of the species that we need to focus more into it and see why they survive, you know.
The last remaining individuals of many frog species are today conserved in sterilized containers, isolated from the outside world, where the dangerous fungus threatens their survival. Like Noah's Arks, these containers are only a fragile and temporary means to preserve the genetic heritage of dozens of amphibian species. But this is the best that scientists can do.
Some of them are not dealing with chytrid yet in their populations, but we know it's going to get there sooner or later. So we're trying to rescue as many as we can, try to breed them, try to keep them healthy. This might be the last one, so it's a huge responsibility for us.
Yeah. In the name of all the frogs dying on the jungle floor, the search continues. Long considered among the most ideal frog habitats, Panama's forests are now a real threat to their survival. Today, this unprecedented epidemic is threatening the ecological balance of ecosystems around the world. In the Cayman Islands, it's increasing human population that is harming habitats. Over half of the original environment has been destroyed.
The population of the Cayman Islands is doubling every 12 years. What that means is the footprint on the land here that's taken over by humans is doubling every 12 years.
This habitat reduction is disastrous for certain endemic species, such as the blue iguana. Found only on Grand Cayman, it is considered one of the most threatened species in the world. As the island's largest herbivore, the blue iguana eats large amounts of fruits and flowers, which helps to disperse plant seeds over large areas. This is vital for maintaining the island's delicate plant diversity.
In 2002, we did a very detailed survey, and it was the most depressing survey I've ever been involved in, because all of the places we used to see iguanas, there were none. We think realistically it was probably more like 12 left in the wild, and they weren't finding each other to breed. So the population was doomed. It was functionally extinct, as we put it, technically speaking. They were there, but there was no future.
In 2002, Frederick Burton left his job to dedicate himself to the recovery of this species. Through trial and error, he learned how to hatch baby iguanas in incubators, far from their natural predators.
When they hatch, they're tiny, they're about this long, but they grow very, very fast. And by the time they're 2 years old, they're naturally predator-proof, effectively. They get too big for the native snakes.
Oh, this is the captive facility. You have a few hundred iguanas in here.
The young iguanas are given refuge at the Grand Cayman's Royal Botanical Park. Breeding adults, responsible for the proliferation of the species, are also kept here.
They have a need for a lot of space. I mean, we found this out. Originally, when we built this facility, we thought this was all we needed. And then we discovered they needed more space. We studied them in the wild, and then we found out, whoa, an animal like this would probably have a territory of maybe an acre or something like that. We have the 2-year-olds that we're going to put out. So Jean, these are the cages where we have the 2-year-old iguanas, the ones that we're getting ready to release into the wild.
It is now time for these young iguanas to take their true place in nature. But will this new captive-born generation succeed in recolonizing Grand Cayman's weakened environment?
Next one. Nice.
So you will sleep there for tonight, right?
Yeah. They'll be hanging in the backpacks, the same backpacks we're going to take in the morning. So they'll cool down and they'll be fine, ready to go.
After years of effort, Frederick Burton convinced the government to establish 2 protected areas on the island, where he can now release his young iguanas.
So Jean, we are on the boundary now of the Collier's Wilderness Reserve. This is the protected area on our left now. It's not huge, but the island isn't big, yeah?
By protecting the reserve from the assault of development, Frederick Burton has protected more than just the iguanas, because dozens of other threatened species also live here.
We will get rid of our packs here and we'll just take the iguana in. Here you go. Here's the box.
Oh, yes. Whoa.
So now He will spend all night inside this box. All night he will sleep in here, and in the morning, at first light, he will come out into this strange world. And the population has gone from about 12 now to about 650, 700, somewhere around there.
A human initiative saved the blue iguana from extinction. Years of effort and protection have resulted in a protected area adapted to these animals' needs. Frederick Burton now hopes that these winning conditions will allow the most threatened reptile on the planet to begin breeding in the wild again.
The perseverance of Frederick Burton is inspiring. It proves that sometimes the efforts of a few dedicated people can make up for the abuses of society.
Sometimes evolution itself can put a species at risk.
All right.
Over time, a species can become isolated on an island, like Escudo de Veraguas, off the coast of Panama. Biologist Bryson Voirin has dedicated his life to studying what some scientists believe is the rarest mammal on Earth, the pygmy three-toed sloth. These sloths live in one of the world's most productive and most useful ecosystems in terms of biodiversity, the mangrove forest.
No, that looks like mangrove.
In the tropics, mangroves protect shorelines from erosion, and they provide food and shelter for many threatened species.
Oh, hey, look, it's eating. There's a sloth right there. It's a female. Yeah, she's eating a leaf. She's got it right in her mouth.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Oh, she's got a baby. Let's see if we're real quiet. Maybe we won't. It's one of the rarest mammals on Earth, and there's two of them right there.
The pygmy three-toed sloth is found only on the island of Escudo de Veraguas. Discovered in 2001, it was immediately classified as critically endangered. Recent studies have indicated that this sloth lives exclusively in the mangrove, making it even more vulnerable, because worldwide, mangroves are being affected by climate change and human development. At current rates, they could disappear entirely by the end of the 21st century. Bryson Voirin is concerned about the survival of pygmy sloths because studies show that there are only 63 of them. During his last expedition, he attached radio collars to 10 sloths. Bryson expects to find them in the mangrove because the animals move very little and use the natural camouflage of the mangrove to avoid predators.
Oh, wow. There he is, right there.
Right there, in the mangroves again.
Yeah, he's still in the mangrove, so he hasn't really gone anywhere in the past month or so.
In the days that follow, he finds 9 of the 10 pygmy sloths, all in the mangrove. But the team is worried because one is missing.
Sebastian. Jean.
Hi, Jean, Sebastian.
Hi, Sebastian. Yeah, we're just at the end of the mangroves. We lost our signal a little bit. We're gonna need some help.
Okay.
In 2005, several families of fishermen took up residence on the island. Their knowledge of the area could help find the missing sloth.
It doesn't really bother.
Hay mucho. Hay mucho.
You think that the one that live in the mangrove, they live in the mangrove, but there is a lot more right behind in the jungle here.
So let's check in the forest for sure. Yeah, definitely. Muchas gracias.
This surprising information contradicts previous studies indicating that the mangrove is the pygmy sloth's sole habitat. Bryson decides to search in one of the channels leading into the forest.
Number 5 is the one that I just don't know where he went. But he might have actually gone out of the mangroves and into the forest, which would be pretty exciting because that means that he's actually eating other things besides mangrove leaves, and he's in the interior of the island maybe. Hopefully we can find him. All right, I got him on the 900 frequency. Hear that chirping? That's the sloth. So he must be straight back that way.
Every step away from the mangrove would appear to increase the credibility of the locals. But it is also possible that Bryson will only find the collar of a poached sloth. But if the sloth is found in the forest, it would be great news for the species. In nearby Costa Rica, Jan and Jose have yet to catch a jaguar. The scientists are concerned because the animal's distribution in the reserve is well known, and the lack of any tracks is surprising. They redouble their efforts in other sectors of the reserve. Capturing such a cunning animal is a huge challenge, but it's an essential part of the research, because only through a better understanding of the jaguar's migration patterns can its living space be increased. On Grand Cayman, Frederick Burton and his blue iguanas have benefited from their protected habitat for nearly 2 years.
Joel? There's a hatchling.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the first wild-born young iguana we have ever seen in this area. This is a wild iguana that has hatched here in the protected area.
So it is working.
It's working. It's
great.
Working. I think it's very interesting working on a small island because it is like a microcosm of what is going on everywhere in the world. And it's very important, I think, for people working in conservation to spend at least part of their time working on things that can succeed. It's important for personal motivation, but it's also important for the way that conservation is presented to the world. People get very tired of hearing bad news stories all the time.
The wild birth of a baby iguana is a triumph of nature. On Escudo de Veraguas, the radio signal leads Bryson Boyrin on his quest.
Yeah, you could just see her fur.
Hey, buddy. Okay. Look at that. Wow. Whew. Victoria. Hey. Whoa, you're looking big. Oh, man.
That's great.
Oh, she looks great. Look at her.
Yeah. That's great.
She looks like she's been doing very good here in the forest and not in the mangroves, so she looks very healthy.
You know, one thing I think that this shows is that even though the mangroves are being cut, that may not be as big of a risk for the pygmy sloths, because if they're able to eat other things in the forest, at least they have other food sources besides just the mangroves. So I'm pretty confident to say that there are more sloths than just 63 on Escudo. There are probably a lot more. If they're in the whole island here like this, that means the population is pretty good.
Ready to go?
All right, Victoria.
Back to home, sweet home.
So the locals were right. If the pygmy sloths are spread over the entire island and live in its abundant forest, scientists will have to re-examine their numbers and maybe even the status of the species. It's fantastic news for the pygmy three-toed sloth. This important discovery was the result of collaboration between scientists and the island's inhabitants. But the happiness of this day is short-lived. Not far away, a nasty surprise awaits the scientists. A green turtle, another endangered species, is trapped in the dugout of a group of poachers.
Except here in the islands, you know, so they're probably gonna cut it up, smoke it, and then they will cook it slowly. They'll finish with it. And this animal can stay at least a week before he starts to get weak.
Do they really know what they're doing?
I really think they really know what they do. The police would come around here maybe 1 or 2 times in a month, just pass around looking for drugs people, but they really not looking to see if people killing sea turtle.
That's pretty sad to see.
It's pretty sad, you know, for me, it's because, you know, I worked 13 years protecting sea turtle with the Peter Maryland Animal and project in Cayo Zapatia. And my father got more than 20 years saving them, you know, trying to save them, and I do the same, you know, so it's pretty sad to see they catch it and they're going to kill it, you know.
Poaching is yet another threat in the fight to conserve endangered species. And the problem is widespread, even in protected areas.
So?
Bad news.
Nothing?
Nothing. We checked all the traps again, where we put the extra pheromones out last night, and nothing.
No tracks, nothing?
No tracks. We actually went along a couple extra trails and checked that where there were some muddy spots from the rain that we had the other day. We haven't seen a track since you've been here.
Well, that's life, I suppose.
Yep, we're obviously very concerned about what might be causing this. Even if we have all this conservation momentum behind us, it can just take a few people to come in and maybe snare some animals, which is what we're hearing. It's depressing.
But where are Cora and the other jaguars? There are rumors that poachers have recently been operating inside the reserve, and 2 of them were even bold enough to brag of their horrible acts on social networks.
Oh my God, that's sad.
It's a catastrophe for the local population, which numbers only 14 jaguars.
How far should we go to protect threatened species? A private militia patrols the reserve every day. Around here, they don't mess around when it comes to conservation. There are rampant rumors that up to 11 jaguars have been killed in the region, possibly even within the boundaries of the reserve. Jaguar skins have been found on the black market.
It makes me sad because it's as if they were threatening members of my own family. So I don't know what we're going to do with these poachers. So much work, love, and sacrifice over so many years, only to see our jaguars killed. We're going to return to the mountain and try to find these hunters who shoot at anything that moves.
On Little Cayman, another type of hunting party is being organized. Local diving associations are mobilizing to wipe out the lionfish, the species now considered the worst poacher in the Caribbean. But the divers must keep up the hunting pressure if they are going to neutralize this invasion, because lionfish reproduce extremely quickly. This is not sustainable. So they have turned to a more natural solution. They are enlisting the help of the few groupers that live near the coastline. Little by little, they are training them to hunt the invader. Who knows whether these few fish will develop a taste for the lionfish and transmit this new feeding habit to other fish. Earth's ecosystems are today weakened and threatened by a variety of external pressures. Conservation efforts are vital, but the hard work of many can be completely undone by the greed of just a few.
Buying the turtle's freedom cost only a few dollars. A modest sum given the situation. We even wondered if we were not trying to appease our own conscience in the face of so much indifference. But this was a living symbol of nature's difficult coexistence with humanity. We just couldn't leave it there and do nothing.
I'm optimistic because I believe we can change things, and if a human being realizes the importance, there's still something we can do, but we are right on the edge.
The coral reef system could be in dire straits, but we need to take efforts in order to mitigate these, and we can stop fishing larger fish and keep them on the reef, and it's important that we do it now.
I'm not really sure which species will survive and which will survive in the future, but I think life will find a way.
The lionfish invasion really highlights for me is the importance for humans to understand that they can have a drastic effect, and they need to realize what they're doing before they do it.
When you're in a forest with predators, it gives you a new respect for life. It gives you a new respect for the connectivity of all things. You actually feel like you're not on the top of the world. Maybe that's where we should begin, is to not just educate people in the classroom, but take people out of the classroom into what's left of the wilderness so that we can actually save it.
If you inspire people and educate them, I think then they'll start to care more about it and help protect it.
The troubled coexistence between humans and the different forms of life on our planet too often translates into the loss of species that play key roles in ecosystems. Perhaps we can draw inspiration from the remarkable work of scientists who dedicate their lives to preserving endangered species. Humanity has a duty to reestablish a harmonious relationship with nature, and do it soon. It is within our grasp to sustainably and harmoniously develop the Earth's resources. But time is running out if our legacy to future generations is to inspire a wave of change and a new attitude. One of respect for biodiversity and the essential harmony among all forms of life. The extraordinary diversity of life on Earth reveals itself in a stunning variety of shapes and colors that paint a unique picture of our planet. Over the eons, plants and animals have evolved to interact with each other in an exquisite balance to form the great tree of life. Our own survival depends on these different forms of life, from the tiniest to the very largest. Biodiversity provides natural services that allow different forms of life to breathe, eat, and reproduce. It regulates the planet's climate and purifies its soil and water. This extraordinary diversity of species, which interact in equilibrium in Earth's various ecosystems, is the very foundation of everything in our world. But unchecked exploitation of the Earth's resources is now threatening this balance.
Biodiversity is not just this abstract concept in halls of science. It's the living underpinning of our lives. And I think in 100 or 200 years, when lots of our geopolitical melodramas have been forgotten, I actually think the world is going to judge this moment that we're in now very much on how we grappled with this issue. So it's exciting to be a part of it at the same time.
The first forms of life arose in the oceans about 3.8 billion years ago. Through natural selection, the driver of evolution, a multitude of species came into existence, forming the basis of the diversity of life as we know it today. But this biodiversity is now threatened. If nothing is done to correct the situation, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all living species could disappear by the end of the century. The oceans are the largest ecosystem on Earth, but our exploitation of their resources is far beyond their ability to regenerate.
The fishing techniques we use today are like warfare, a war we are waging against fish.
It is estimated that 87% of the Earth's oceans are overexploited or exploited to their limits by the fishing industry.
The way fisheries are controlled out here in the open sea, it's no man's land. It's everyone take all. Everything is for free.
The spectacular growth of industrialized fishing has caused an alarming decline in fish stocks, a decline that threatens the very survival of the fishing industry.
If we would be to take all the subsidies to the fishing fleets, most of those fleets would stop the day after.
In recent decades, stocks of large fish in the world's oceans have plummeted by 90%. These large predators are essential to the balance of marine ecosystems.
All the data says we have a big, serious crisis. But what I like to say is that extinction is only inevitable if you watch it on TV.
For several years, the oceanographic schooner Sedna 4 has crisscrossed the Earth's oceans. Mission leader, Jean Lemire.
We have embarked on a 3-year trip around the world to assess the state of biodiversity. Our mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, will allow us to meet with scientists who dedicate their lives to the comprehension of what is critically at stake regarding our environment.
All of that takes time.
The Sedna heads to Costa Rica in Central America, where the economy depends in large part on the extraordinary biodiversity of its national parks. Every year, tourists from around the world come here to get in touch with nature. The magnificent beach of Playa Grande in the Guanacaste region receives its share of tourists. But come nightfall, they give way to biologists and volunteers. Tonight, like every winter night, the beach belongs to one of the ocean's oldest creatures, the leatherback turtle. At high tide, this female has come to lay her eggs, as her ancestors have done for nearly 100 million years.
We spent 20 years, the best years of our lives, saving these turtles, right?
Biologists James Botilla and Frank Palladino founded the Leatherback Trust, an organization dedicated to saving Pacific leatherback turtles.
We've been protecting every nest on the beach, protecting all the turtles, producing lots of hatchlings. They take 15, 20 years to mature. We've been doing this 20 years, so we're starting to see new turtles coming.
It is estimated that 60% of leatherback turtles have disappeared in the past 30 years.
She looks to be about 145 centimeters long, probably around 18 to 20 years of age. And she's finished nesting. She's now in the process of early bearing. But you can see how delicately she's using her hands to pat the sand down and to pack it so that the eggs are in a nice location. And then she will start to camouflage and cover all around here. And in 60 days, hopefully at this point, some turtles will dig their way up and out and head out back out to the ocean. In 1980, there was over 100,000 females nesting in the Pacific alone. Now we estimate there's only about 1,500 to 3,000, and that's since 1980. And the only thing that has changed is the impact that humans have had on them. We take away the beaches because we develop them to have our recreation and hotels and so on, so they can't reproduce on their natal beaches anymore. We changed our fishing practices in the 80s. Now we have long lines, which by accidental bycatch will kill turtles, and the estimates are that about 20,000 turtles a year. And the third thing we did was we harvested their eggs.
According to popular belief, these eggs have aphrodisiac properties, creating a black market that thrives even today.
In California, especially along the Pacific, they have swarms of jellyfish. And they say, we never had swarms of jellyfish before. And I tell them, you've taken the major predators of jellyfish out of the ocean. Where there used to be 100,000, now there's only 1,500. And each of those turtles would eat an estimate of 90 kilograms of jellyfish a day. And not only do those jellyfish have an impact that we have to close the beach because you're going to get stung, but they eat the little fish in the ocean that grow up into the big fish that we like to catch and eat. So the more jellyfish you have, the more problems there is also. So when you say, are leatherbacks important to save? I say, well, there's a good example for you. Right here on the tag, it tells you what time she came up, when she started digging, when she's covering. She did lay 49 eggs. We know what season that she has come in. There is a cohort of 4 or 5 females that have nested here for 4 different seasons, and it's almost 20 years apart from the first time we've seen them to this time. So we know an awful lot about the demographics of these turtles.
Of the 7 turtle species living in our oceans, 6 are on the red list of threatened or vulnerable species. But turtles are not the only members of this unenviable list. Another emblem of our oceans has a troubled coexistence with humans: the shark. Sharks have existed in our oceans for over 400 million years. Yet today, about a third of the world's species of sharks and rays are threatened with extinction, primarily because of overfishing. Large ocean predators, which play an essential role in maintaining balance in our ecosystems, are on the losing side of decades of exploitation.
There are recent scientific publications that say that, in general, all marine predators have declined 90% in the last 50 years. So, you know, it's not looking good.
Biologist Randall Arauz is internationally recognized for his efforts to protect Costa Rica's turtle and shark populations. As an activist, he uses every means at his disposal to raise awareness of the catastrophic decline of turtles and sharks around the world. Through protests, school programs, and negotiating with fishermen, Randall tries to educate the public about the importance of large predators in ecosystems. And he wages an unrelenting war against long-line fishers who indiscriminately target large fish species.
A friend of mine was lucky enough and he was able to get a job on one of these longline boats as a cook. So when he got the job, he told me. So we put that camera on the boat with my friend, and he was acting like it was a family video. And sure enough, he brought video of leatherback sea turtles on the long lines, sea lions on the long lines, molas, all sorts of wildlife. So this is the first time we're getting a glimpse of what is occurring with the longline fishery, the bycatch problem that it constitutes. And at the very end of the video, they pull up a shark. They hack off the fin and they throw the shark back into the water. And I was just stunned. Like, what was that? What just happened?
What Randall had just witnessed for the first time was the cruel practice of shark finning. In its most barbaric form, the shark is dragged onto the boat, where the fishers hack off its fins and tail. They then throw the shark back to sea, often still alive. Unable to swim, it dies a slow death by suffocation. These images sparked an outcry against this practice.
First of all, it's cruel. It's a cruel, painful death for these magnificent animals. From a more technical point of view, it's unsustainable. They're wiping out marine biodiversity so that a culture on the other side of the world can have their shark fin soup.
Shark fins represent only about 5% of the animal's body mass, but they can fetch up to $400 per kilogram, making them one of the most valuable marine products in the world. It is estimated that between 40 and 70 million sharks are killed every year for this controversial market. The Sedna stops on the island of Fayal in the middle of the Atlantic. Sitting astride the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Azores archipelago is the result of 20 million years of volcanic activity. These spectacular islands, which emerged from the ocean only 5 million years ago, are still changing under the effects of volcanism and shifts in the 3 major tectonic plates that meet here. Deep in the ocean, seamounts rise toward the surface, causing an upwelling of ocean currents. This, in turn, sustains an abundance of marine life. The exceptional richness of these waters attracts many different species.
The most important fishing grounds in the whole of the Azores. And you have these 2 major...
Pedro Afonso, a biologist at the University of the Azores, works with a team of scientists to better understand the role of large predators in ecosystems.
Which means that it's probably the time...
A shark specialist, he has earned the trust of local fishers. Thanks to the long-standing relationships Afonso has developed, the Sedna's mission leader, Jean Lemire, is allowed to experience life aboard a long liner. These fishing boats are frequently portrayed as the source of all evil.
Our old ideas of the sea and products of the sea are a thing of the past. The fishing techniques we use today are like warfare, a war we are waging against fish.
This long liner alone will cast nearly 100 kilometers of line, containing thousands of baited hooks. The line is reeled in every 12 hours over the next 3 weeks. This represents over 40 periods of intensive fishing, regardless of conditions. Although this fishing technique is not highly selective, the fishers are primarily seeking swordfish, a large predator that fetches good prices. Fishing boats have operated in these rich waters for years. But despite the use of ever more effective fishing techniques, catches are declining. Today, far fewer swordfish and other large fish are caught in the waters off the Azores. And it's the same around the world. Yet fishing pressure today is greater than ever. The largest fish are preserved on ice to supply the insatiable market for fresh fish. Since a fishing trip lasts at least 3 weeks, the fish sold in supermarkets have often been caught a month earlier. Current regulations specify a minimum catch size for swordfish. Legally, smaller fish must be thrown back. But in general, these young swordfish are cleaned and frozen to be sold later. This practice is illegal. Biologist Gonzalo Grassa often serves as a scientific observer on fishing boats.
How can we avoid that situation where, they are catching fish that are too small? That's probably difficult, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways can be increase the size of the hook.
and there are several kinds of hooks. There are some twisted, and well, but when they use another kind of hook, they don't catch so many fish, and they prefer to catch a little bit more fish, but smaller than no fish.
Fishermen dispute this regulation on fish size. They contend that since most of the young swordfish are already dead when they haul them aboard, they don't see why they should be forced to throw them back. With no one enforcing the regulation, young swordfish continue to be caught.
Long lining is fishing at an industrial scale. It's a perfect example of everything that's wrong with fishing. It's a world unto itself, where companies do practically whatever they like. It's like a city without a police force that's controlled by gangs and mobsters. It's incredible.
The major decline in swordfish stocks has given rise to a new market: shark fishing. Long viewed merely as accidental catches, what fishermen call bycatch, sharks were thrown back because of their low market value. But the expansion of the lucrative shark fin market has changed all that.
The fishery, at least in the Atlantic, shifted from a swordfish fishery to a blue shark and swordfish fishery. And actually nowadays, the European fleet depends on the blue shark to make a living.
The commercial fishing industry now relies heavily on the significant revenue earned from shark fins. Sharks are no longer considered bycatch, and fishers are directly targeting the blue shark, an abundant species in oceans all over the world, to compensate for lower revenues from declining fish stocks. Unlike swordfish, most sharks are still very much alive when they are hauled aboard. But the size of the animal does not appear to be a factor for sharks. Even the young ones end up in the ship's hold.
The way fisheries are controlled out here in the open sea, it's no man's land. It's everyone take all. Everything is for free. And that isn't changing yet. And I think that is something that many countries have to work on. The United States, the Economic Union, Australia, which is a big fishing nation. And, you know, we need to get together and change the way fishery policy is established.
From a regulatory standpoint, there is a huge difference between the kind of shark fishing done on this longliner and finning, the practice of removing only the shark's fins before throwing the animal back to sea. Horrific images of finning have been shown around the world, and public opinion has turned against this cruel practice. More and more countries now ban shark finning.
Our campaigns have had major impact in Costa Rica. For instance, we were able to create laws against shark finning. There's a real famous law now that you can only allow sharks to be brought to port if they have the fin attached to the body. And this law is known as the Costa Rican anti-shark finning law. And right now we have 6 countries following this law: Ecuador, Colombia, El Salvador, the United States. And right now in the Economic Union, there are discussions to also impose this law. You must bring the shark with the fin attached. And shark finners say, oh, you can't do that, because if the shark is frozen, you can't take the fin off. And we have proven in Costa Rica that it is all a lie. You can bring sharks frozen to port, you can remove the fin, it can be done. Whoever says it can't be done is because they're shark finning and it's very uncomfortable for them to do it any other way. When we started these campaigns, 400 foreign longline boats from Taiwan would land their products in Costa Rica every year. Now we're down to 70 or 80. Unfortunately, I don't think we can really call it a victory until we push them out of Central America and hopefully out of the Eastern Tropical Pacific.
Faced with increasing public pressure, shark fishers must now keep the entire body of the shark, which is frozen and sold. This major change to the regulations means that most of the fish is now utilized. In practical terms, this kind of shark fishing is completely legal.
Before, the meat of blue shark was considered to be useless. Now we have a market to carry this meat, this protein, and distribute it as a wide variety of products, of fish byproducts, from fish sticks to fish meal.
Blue shark carcasses and their precious fins are now propping up an industry that can no longer support itself because of its own past abuses. But what are the long-term consequences of intensive fishing on blue shark populations?
The international agencies say that stocks vary between very overexploited in the Mediterranean Sea, for example, to intensively exploited in the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not the most threatened shark population in the globe, for sure, but there are concerns as to the point at which it can withstand the current levels of exploitation.
The expansion of industrial fishing is like a red stain spreading over the world. It starts in Western Europe, and Russia plays an important role, as does North America. It then spreads to the African coasts, and then to the South Atlantic and South Pacific. It spreads like a skin disease. And this wave, this red tide, gets to the Antarctic, and it stops, because it can't go any further. There's no future in fishing. Too many restrictions, and the finger is always pointed at us. No matter what we do, it's always our fault. So I don't see much of a future in it, especially shark fishing. No more sharks, no more fishing. All that's left is to break the ships apart and burn them.
The fishing fleets have grown in the past decades dependent on subsidies from governments. That is, the real cost involved in sending a fishing vessel out there with all the costs in fuel, in gear, in paying the crewmen, etc., is just not overturned by the real profit that the catch is going to make in the market. And the only reason why that fleet or that particular vessel is doing its everyday fishing is because it gets subsidies from all of us taxpayers to lower the cost of those items.
The destruction of marine ecosystems is being financed in part by government subsidies, amounting to anywhere from $20 to $30 billion a year. Yet it is completely conceivable that this money could be used to remove boats from the fishing fleet and retrain the fishermen. This would result in a smaller fishery that is sustainable and profitable.
If we would be to take all the subsidies to the fishing fleets all over the world, and in particular in developed countries, most of those fleets would stop the day after.
If the fishing industry is committing suicide, we must prevent that. But then we should declare it incompetent, if you will. If a system is not working, we should take charge of it, not let it spontaneously self-destruct. In the Mediterranean, fishing is banned for 2 months, and fishermen are compensated.
Why don't Portugal and Spain do like Italy? Why not stop for 2 months in the summer? The fishing authorities know very well what goes on in the Mediterranean. We could protect our species like they do. And they don't even have quotas. But they make us throw fish under 25 kilos back to sea. Italy's part of Europe, isn't it? If the fish is alive, we remove the hook and return it to the water. If it's caught by the belly, we use it for bait. But if it's dead, what can we do? Bring it back to life? Of course not. So we keep it. It means more income, even if we're not allowed to keep it. We tell them that it was already dead, but they don't care. They say it's illegal, that they can't tell for sure if it was dead or not. And they fine us anyway.
The businessmen are in charge of establishing the policy. And of course, their policy is always considering their own pockets. What we need is fisheries directed with the public interest, with science in mind. How many boats can fish this resource? When should we stop fishing? Where should we not fish? Then even if it hurts somebody's pocket, we must stop fishing.
How am I supposed to make a living? Offer me a good job and I'll stop. Offer me a job that lets me come home at night and I'll take it.
The time spent on board with these fishermen was a troubling experience. It is difficult not to question the morality of this new market for shark flesh. At the current market price, fishermen only get less than $1 a kilo, a tiny fraction of the price obtained for shark fins. At this price, is it a real and profitable market, or is it a way to skirt around the new laws adopted by numerous countries to forbid finning?
The good relation between fishermen and scientists is crucial to solve this big challenge we have in minds. First of all, we already talked about how important it is to get this crucial data. But there's no way you're going to get this crucial data without the collaboration between, the active collaboration between these two agents, because many times it's the fishermen that allow you to have access to those data. So that is absolutely crucial to start with. Secondly, the fishermen themselves have a lot of knowledge that very often is on the base of the scientific knowledge itself. So you will never get that knowledge if there is no trust between those two actors. So that needs to be part of the deal.
Our oceans have been patient. They have been patient with us. But now, the demand is becoming increasingly unrealistic. It's not hard to imagine a day when fishing will be mostly artisanal. There will be fewer fishermen because they won't be needed. Fish will be a luxury item, something you pay a premium for to eat on special occasions, like a Christmas turkey.
The decline of fish stocks in our oceans has already begun. And if nothing is done to correct the situation quickly, this decline could reach alarming proportions. Globally, nearly 1 billion people depend on fish as their primary source of protein. So we must rethink our relationship with the seafood products we consume. Shark research is a relatively new field, and scientists will have to intensify their efforts to better understand the ecology of large predators if they are to propose effective conservation measures. Pedro Afonso and his team are trying to unravel the mysteries of the migration routes used by the blue shark.
We know where are the juvenile grounds. There's also some good evidence about where preferred mating grounds are located, but it is the pupping grounds that are still very elusive to science. We suspect that the Azores can be an area of increased pupping opportunities, only in a particular time of the year, which happens to be right now.
The Sedna, a former fishing vessel herself, will be the scientific vessel for this occasion. The goal of this mission, to capture a gestating female blue shark.
There is an era of research on marine ecology and behavior before the advent of electronic tagging and another one after the advent of electronic tagging. The capacity of these devices to open windows into the life of these animals and into the significance of particular habitats is just too precious for us to leave it behind.
Using satellite transmitters, scientists are able to gather an impressive amount of essential data, such as time and depth of dives, information about the physical environment, and, of course, detailed records of an animal's movement patterns. Lady Luck smiles upon the scientists. They have just captured a female blue shark, but they must act quickly.
Vertebrates in general have this thing called the tonic immobility reflex, which basically is when you're turned upside down, you become numb. And they get really amenable to work with. And we think that they also get a decreased pain function. We do that to promote natural anesthesia.
The satellite beacon is attached to the shark's dorsal fin. Every time the animal surfaces, the emitter will send the data stored in its internal memory to the satellite.
Of course, there's some injury inflicted into the animal, but it's minimal injury compared to the types of injury that blue sharks take during their lives.
Despite the size of this female, the scientists can't be certain that it is currently gestating. Sharks are viviparous, meaning that the embryos develop inside the female.
Look!
Oh yeah.
Look!
Oh yeah.
Baby shark, right here. Look at this. You asked for pregnant female.
We need to be fast now.
Okay.
You want to be fast. You want to be fast.
Here.
Oh yeah, again. Females have this reflex. When they're close to be ready to deliver, if they're in life-threatening situations like this, they will try to get the babies out, even if it's a bit early, because they will survive, whereas she might not. So, well, that's a defense. She needs some water flowing.
Okay.
Okay. Stop. It's the kind of experience that provokes these contradictory feelings, right? On one hand, you're witnessing a rare event that actually tells you some very important information for the conservation of the species you're working with. On the other hand, we were a bit stressed as well because we didn't want to put stress in mom and on the little pups. The pups were not fully sized, which is about 40 centimeters. I would say those pups would be around 35 centimeters. But as we saw, the pups took probably, 3 to 4 seconds after an initial moment of confusion to swim away in a very steady way.
There you go. All right. Okay. Right.
The temporary captivity required to install the satellite tag will not harm this female, which now regains its freedom.
All right.
The data collected by the transmitter will give scientists a better understanding of the shark's migration routes and help to better protect the species on fishing grounds, especially during this critical period of reproduction. Over the course of hundreds of millions of years, sharks have lived through every major extinction event the Earth has experienced. Yet, in only a few decades' time, humanity has jeopardized the survival of the ocean's greatest predator. And it is not alone.
You have an opportunity to see a dinosaur come out of the ocean and do all these very intricate behaviors. And I don't think there's anybody who ever walks away from this beach after seeing this experience that hasn't been awed. This is probably one of the magnificent sights that you'll see in nature. As adults, they don't have a predator, so they're very long-lived, but now they weren't living long enough to replace themselves. What I mean by that is each turtle comes up and let's say in a really good year they lay 10 nests of 65 eggs. That means they have laid 650 eggs. You would think that's a lot, but only about half of those eggs hatch. So that means there's 325 hatchlings. And now our data over the 20 years is showing that for 1,000 hatchlings that come up out of the ground, only one returns about 15 years later to start laying eggs. That means they have a 1 in 1,000 chance. So those 325 turtles that hatched in one season, that's not even replacing her. So she has to come back 3 years later, lay again. That's another 325. It still has not replaced. Has to come back in another 3 years, 9 years, or maybe 10, 11 total, because it's 3 to 4 years that they return. You finally have replaced the female, but you haven't replaced the male. So it takes a long time for these turtles to replace themselves.
This leatherback turtle now returns to the sea, leaving her precious eggs behind, thus perpetuating a natural cycle hundreds of millions of years old.
We have a national park with having a foundation raising donations, trained the local people, educated them, everything's great, and now climate change comes, just what we need. The problem for these turtles in climate change is that they don't have sex chromosomes, and the sex of the turtle depends upon the temperature of incubation. So at 29.5 degrees in a nest, you get about 50-50 male and female. 29, you get all male turtles. Above 30 degrees, you get all female turtles. And when you get up towards 34 degrees, they all start dying. It gets too hot. So the beach here is generally, by December, on a dry year, is running 30, 31 degrees. So we're producing females. And the projections are for climate change. As the Earth warms from global warming, this area of Costa Rica will get warmer and drier. Many areas get wetter, but this gets warmer and drier. Therefore, this beach will get hotter. And we will have to do some management, or we will, one, produce all female turtles, or second, they will all die.
Conservation measures alone are no longer enough to save the Pacific leatherback turtle. Soon, it will be necessary to artificially control the egg's incubation temperature to ensure the survival of the species. The tragic fate of the leatherback turtle is a prime example of the uneasy coexistence between humanity and the other forms of life on this planet.
We talk about sharks are going extinct, turtles are going extinct, how important they are for the ecosystem, you know, and we go to meetings and we go to conventions. So all this talk and talk and talk, but no action. Scientists are saying we have another 40 or 50 years before it's all depleted. In our lifetime, we may see this big dramatic change, and let's hope we can stop it. We need everybody's help.
I am a near-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. Now, in reality, all the data says we have a big, serious crisis. But what I like to say is that extinction is only inevitable if you watch it on TV.
We need a more sustainable management of global fishing in the world. And that might take the exploitation of lower trophic chain resources, which can still give good protein to people and release a little bit our pressure on the top levels. So balanced harvesting is becoming a major hope in the fisheries science arena.
The people working on climate change, they understand. If we add acidification to the equation, it's the apocalypse. Everybody loses. And in 100 years, there are no fisheries anywhere. It's unthinkable. Because if we can't solve this problem at the beginning of the century, there won't be a fishery at the end of the century.
We are the passive witnesses to our own decline, but we are also the species that hold the solutions to the problems of our environment. The sustainable development of the Earth resources is possible, and it is perhaps our only hope.
The conservation challenges are considerable, but it's not too late to act. Of all species, humans have benefited most from the natural laws of evolution, and we must show restraint and control in exploiting the Earth's resources. Is it not time for us to take another look at our relationship with nature if we are to preserve the extraordinary biodiversity that supports life? The extraordinary diversity of life on Earth is the result of a fragile balance that dictates the fundamental laws of life and allows different forms of life to interact, grow, and reproduce. The culmination of eons of evolution, life expresses itself in a colorful canvas that gives the Earth its unique character. Our own survival depends on this biodiversity, from the tiniest life forms to the very largest. The first forms of life arose in the oceans about 3.8 billion years ago. Today, they still support an array of fragile ecosystems that continue to astonish us as we learn more about them. But our planet's biodiversity is threatened. Today, plant and animal species are disappearing at an accelerated rate, probably unequaled in Earth's history. We must regain a balance between all species if we want to preserve the ecosystem services that nature provides. These services are what allow our own species to exist. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. They represent 300 times more inhabitable volume than all of Earth's land habitats. It is estimated that more than 2 million species live in the oceans, about a quarter of all living species. Over 90% have yet to be documented by science. For scientists, unraveling the ocean's mysteries is a formidable challenge. Jean Lemire, mission leader of the oceanographic schooner Sedna IV.
Our mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, is in the spirit of the great explorers of yesteryears. With scientists, we are traveling the world's ocean to better understand the conservation challenges that we all face. And there are many, many challenges, because the ocean still bears the scars of our past abuses.
The history of our exploitation of the oceans is not a glorious one. In order to supply European lanterns with oil, the great whales were hunted to the brink of extinction. We are still living with the consequences of this carnage today. Many species are still on the endangered list. Fin whales, blue whales, minke whales, right whales, and dozens of other species are struggling to recover from our bloody past. Despite the fragile moratorium that now protects most species, some countries still hunt whales in the name of science or of culture.
That is ridiculous because we don't need to take the whales for science, in quotes, especially if you use the subproduct of that science to sell it in the market.
Scientific whaling, overexploitation of ocean resources, illegal fishing. The pressure we place on the oceans has become unsustainable, and these already considerable conservation challenges have been complicated by even more insidious problems, such as plastic pollution.
The gyre, where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas. So we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The oceans have always supported life, but if that life is today being threatened, is it not time to rethink our relationship with the ocean's inhabitants? Of all the great oceanic migrants, whales are without question one of the most emblematic symbols of conservation. The Sedna has stopped in the Azores. The rich Atlantic waters here attract 24 species of cetacean. Though they have a long history of whale hunting, the Azorians gave up this tradition in the late 1980s. Richard Sears has studied whales for over 30 years. Every spring, the great diversity of species off the Azores lures him here to study the migratory patterns of large Atlantic whales. But it's not an easy task. Following these great migrating nomads of the oceans is a challenge for scientists.
OK, donc, on se met une heure de départ à 13h, 13h30, heure locale.
Richard travels the world to photograph different species. He introduced me to the fascinating world of whales. We often work together, and I have traveled with him to different oceans, always with the same passion, the same desire to learn more about them.
Scientists are a bit like the hunters of yesterday. In modern science, the camera has replaced the harpoon. The quest is the same, but the goal has changed. Today, we have a real desire to protect whales. These species are slowly recovering from the excessive commercial whaling that forever changed the face of our oceans. Among the victims of commercial whale hunting, the right whale. A symbol of our past abuses, the right whale is a coastal species, slow and easy to approach, and was a preferred target of the harpoon. In less than 70 years in the 19th century, North American whalers killed over 190,000 right whales in the North Atlantic. Hunting right whales was banned in 1935, but the damage was done. At that time, the population was estimated at fewer than 100 individuals in the entire North Atlantic. Today, after over 3/4 of a century of protection, only about 350 representatives of this severely threatened species remain. As hunting techniques improved, whalers were able to go after fast-swimming, ocean-going species like the blue whale, the largest animal on the planet. Up to 30 meters in length, and over 100 tons of power and grace. Before commercial hunting, the worldwide population of blue whales was estimated at over 350,000 individuals. Over the past century, nearly 99% of this population was slaughtered. Richard Sears is an expert on blue whales. He has developed a photo ID technique so that scientists can now identify and monitor the movements of this species, which is still threatened with extinction.
The pigmentation pattern on the sides of blue whales allows us to reliably identify individuals. We have identified about 325 blue whales in the North Atlantic, including many photos taken in the Azores. We have many partners here who take good pictures that allow us to match photos from year to year. In this case, Johanna, who works here in Horta, photographed this whale in 2002, and the animal returned in 2010. That's a long time between matches. I think it's the longest match we've had here in the Azores.
For over 30 years, Richard Sears has compiled photographs of blue whales. His catalog includes several hundred individuals in the North Atlantic, but their migration routes remain completely shrouded in mystery. The humpback whale was also hunted all over the world. It is estimated that in the mid-19th century, the worldwide population of humpbacks was over 125,000 individuals. In less than 100 years, nearly 95% of the population was wiped out by whalers. By the mid-1960s, only a few thousand survivors remained. In the 1980s, a broad scientific effort led to a series of techniques that today form the basis of our knowledge about this species. Among these techniques is the identification of individuals using photographs of the tail flukes.
Here's an example of photo identification of a humpback whale. It's the equivalent of a fingerprint for this species. They are kind enough to raise their fluke when they dive, and the pattern on the underside of the tail is different for each individual. It can vary from totally black to totally white. Studying individuals helps us learn about the species, and now we have extensive catalogs of humpbacks all over the planet. All this data makes it a powerful system because it allows us to learn about the movements of these animals their migrations, their numbers, and newcomers to the population.
This technique led to the discovery of gathering sites for the species in the North Atlantic. These feeding areas are frequented by different humpback whale populations from spring to fall. Scientific research has shown that populations are faithful to these gathering sites. A humpback whale that frequents coastal waters in a particular area will generally return to the same place the following season. Every winter, most North Atlantic humpbacks migrate south to Silverbank off the coast of the Dominican Republic. They gather on this protected shallow area to mate and give birth. But scientists only discovered the importance of silverbank in the 1980s.
84, it was my first time I saw a whale. We didn't know even where was located silverbank. We heard about it, but we didn't know. The density of silverbank, if it's not the highest, it could be one of the highest of the world.
Nowadays, everything we know about the animals' movements between here and the north seems obvious. But back then, we knew very little, almost nothing. We knew they came here, but it had never been studied in depth. So we came, and we made a great many photo IDs. Each of us recognized animals from the different areas we were working in.
Over 30 years after the discovery of silverbank, scientists are back. They are now trying to determine the migration routes used by humpback whales between silverbank and their different feeding areas. For biologist Amy Kennedy, this is a chance to deploy satellite transmitters.
Smallest guy, that one. It's the end of the season, so there are lots of males in large groups who are very active. There's a struggle between the escort and what we call the challengers. The escort is the male closest to the female, and all the other males fight to be as close to the female as possible.
Before installing the satellite beacons, the scientists try to identify the sex of the animals. They use a crossbow that shoots an arrow with a hollow tip to take a sample of the animal's skin and blubber. Using genetic profiles, scientists can determine the kinship among the different individuals.
So we have developed also a large database of whale tissue. Besides the samples that were taken for DNA studies, we also developed the archive. So it's a genetical catalog. We have whales identified genetically, and this, together with their photo IDs, they complete the information. And if anybody wants to study the population, we have another, let's say, another piece of the sample, which is the archive. They are intact as they were taken, and they are frozen, keeping their qualities. So if anybody needs to do any further study, like molecular study, biomolecular study, so they just need to go to the archive and take a piece and interpret it.
To deploy the satellite transmitter, the scientist's boat must slip into a group of males competing for the favors of a female. It's a delicate maneuver.
need to be as close as possible, and when I shoot the tag, it's not a matter of just hitting the whale. I could shoot from a long distance and just hit the whale. It has to be in a really very specific spot where the tag goes. So I'm trying to tag very high on the animal. I'm trying to tag just below the dorsal fin and just below the hump. And that's because the tissue there is very dense. So I can track the whale underwater. I see what the animal's doing. I indicate to Oswaldo to speed up, slow down. I can see the whale. You can tell when it's coming up. I get ready. And when I know the whale's going to come up, and preferably when it arches, I'm focused on a perpendicular shot directly in one little spot, and I really, in my head, I see almost nothing else. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy.
The transmitter is attached to the animal's back using a modified line thrower, which shoots the transmitter's anchoring hooks into the whale's flesh without causing too much injury.
Position very high and in very dense tissue, so it will stay in a long time, and it will transmit every surfacing. 11.
That's the tag.
Coming up. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy. I'm happy with today. The tags that we got on were in good positions, and I'm relieved, and I can't wait to start tracking them. I don't get to the computer now and see where they go. So this is the 4 whales that we tagged on the 2nd. So this is 4 full days of track for all 4 whales, which is really exciting because the cool thing is that all 4 of these whales were tagged in the same exact group. They were all there together, and then you can see that each one of them has gone a completely different direction. One whale has stayed almost exactly around the same spot that we tagged it. One whale has moved over to Mouchoir Bank, and one whale looks like it's starting its migration up north. And then another whale looks like it's moving to the southeast, which is really unique. And we hope that these keep lasting, because we'll be able to check them every day from here on out. And I check them a lot, so constantly checking my tags and making sure they're all working and see where everybody's going.
You know, it's very important, this preliminary information, because we have seen that in just 5 days after the tag, the whales are outside of the boundaries of the sanctuary. So for our country, this information is very important in terms of maybe developing new policies for conservation, maybe expanding the boundaries of the sanctuary. You see how important it is for the sanctuary to be included in these areas.
So can we sort of amuse ourselves with the thought of where these guys might be going? And I would say that the Mouchoir Bank guy has a good chance of going to the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a very good guess. I think these other whales, if they move offshore and then start heading north, they have a straight shot to somewhere else. So.
Iceland or maybe even Norway?
Yeah. There are very distinct feeding grounds in the North Atlantic, and they're characterized by high site fidelity, which means that if you go to the Gulf of Maine, you are likely to see whales that you've been seeing for generations. And it's the same with all of the major feeding grounds, Norway, Iceland, Newfoundland, Greenland. And it's all driven by the mother. So the mother will bring her calf there on its first migration. The calf remembers that migratory route and will continue to return there throughout its lifespan. Researchers in all of the feeding grounds have several generations of whales. I mean, we'll see a calf and we'll know its mother and its grandmother and its great-grandmother and its great-great-grandmother, which is awesome, just really, really great. It really shows that these whales are multinational world travelers. They are not Dominican whales, and they're not American whales or Canadian whales. They are whales of the entire North Atlantic. They cross so many different borders across so many different countries. And so we need to all work together to help preserve this species.
While some of the transmitters operated for a limited amount of time, whale number 87765 broke all records by transmitting for 57 consecutive days. The migration data of whale 87765 stopped off the coast of Newfoundland. Where will it go next? Will it remain around Newfoundland, or will it continue its migration towards Iceland, Greenland, or even Norway? The migration data confirms that humpback whales, which do not eat for the entire 4 months of their breeding period, begin to feed again as soon as they arrive in the rich waters of the north. A humpback whale requires 2 tons of food per day. But can the current state of the oceans support any eventual population increase of these species? The composition of the oceans is undergoing a transformation. Their biomass has declined sharply since the start of human exploitation. For whales, seabirds, turtles, sharks, and all migratory species that rely on the oceans, the future is more uncertain than ever.
The food that marine populations need to survive is in decline. Scientists are worried about the growing number of dead zones in the oceans. Off the coast of Bermuda, we met with scientists from the Corvette Kramer, a research vessel studying the composition of the oceans. They recently discovered a new continent of plastic in the Atlantic Ocean.
Sea Education Association essentially is an educational organization that teaches students about the ocean. We do a lot of basic measurements, and the value of those relatively simple measurements is that we go year after year, more or less to the same places. So for instance, our plastic research, where we're doing relatively simple things, each student project is relatively simple, but they build on each other over time.
So what they're going to do now is set up the new stud net, and this is our old standby net. We've been doing it the same way for 30 years. And realistically, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but we don't want to change what we're doing because we have a long-term database, and so we want to keep doing it the same way every time.
A few years ago, the discovery of a substantial accumulation of plastic in the Pacific Ocean came as a bombshell all over the world. No one suspected the same thing in the Atlantic, where the Sea Education Association has been gathering data for 20 years. But in fact, concentrations of plastic in the Atlantic equal or surpass those observed in the Pacific. And this invisible patch extends into the feeding areas of the ocean's great migrators.
The plastic comes from land. We think that probably around 80% of it is actually shore-based. So it's from you and me. We're trying to do our best. We're trying to recycle, but you know, it's a windy day. The piece of plastic, the yogurt container blows out of the recycle bin, gets in the water system in the river, ends up in the ocean.
I just wanted to show you some of the kinds of things that we find. This piece is broken, and you can see it's starting to get brittle. It's being weathered by the sun, by just wave action, getting quite brittle into small pieces, easy to break. And we're seeing numbers as high as 250,000 pieces per square kilometer, or even higher. Now granted, most of those pieces are tiny, millimeter-sized pieces, but still, it's a big ocean. When you extrapolate that to the size of the ocean and the patches, it's a lot of plastic.
Our plastic garbage ends up in the ocean, where exposure to sun and waves weakens its structure and breaks it into countless tiny pieces that are now inundating the oceans. What is misleadingly called a garbage patch is actually more like a soup of tiny particles, often floating just below the surface.
Did you see some increase of the numbers of pieces of plastic over the 22 years of research?
No, in a lot of variability, but no real increase over that time. So the question is, where is that plastic going? And one idea is, of course, it could be the microbes.
And yet, our society is using more and more plastic. Microbes and bacteria may play an important role in breaking down this plastic, but at what price?
It's hard to say whether it's good news or bad news. Is it good news that it's making plastic go away? There are a lot of additives in plastic, and plastic also acts as a bit of a sponge, absorbing toxic chemicals. So you could ask yourself, is it better for those chemicals to stay in one place in the plastic or to be released into the ocean?
If plastic acts like a sponge, where do all those toxins go? Recent scientific studies in the Pacific Ocean estimate that fish consume between 12 and 24,000 tons of plastic every year.
And it still isn't exactly clear how much these toxins transfer up the food chain from plastic. There has been some work done to show it does happen, but absolutely, we're polluting the ocean, and then it does stay in the food chain, and then we eat the fish.
We produce about 300 million tons of new plastic every year. Half of this, about 150 million tons, is only used once, then thrown away. Worldwide, less than 10% of the plastic we produce is recycled. The development of plastics began in the 20th century. It is estimated that hundreds of millions of tons of plastic have found their way into the oceans in recent decades. Much of this garbage is still floating today. Plastic in the oceans accumulates in specific areas all over the planet, where the major ocean currents concentrate the floating plastic. These immense vortexes, called ocean gyres, draw in and accumulate garbage over wide areas. This pollution ends up in 5 major ocean basins: the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic and Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the most well-known ocean gyre, the North Pacific. The Midway Atoll, north of the Hawaiian Islands, seems incredibly remote. But for many Pacific seabird species, it is an important refuge and nesting site. The island's most abundant bird is the Laysan albatross, classified a vulnerable species. They come here to lay their eggs and raise their chicks, far from any predators. But the real threat to the Laysan albatross is much more insidious than any predator.
John, yes. You look at Midway, and it's so remote. It's in the middle of this beautiful Pacific Ocean. And your first thought is it should be pristine, untouched, white sand beaches with nothing on it. A lot of disturbance. But instead we see lots of plastic.
Here, and then just beach disturbance. So it's been a slow.
The winds and the currents of the North Pacific Gyre combine to concentrate plastic in this area. It is not unusual to see the beaches of Midway littered with all sorts of large floating objects, which must continually be collected. But a closer look at the white sand beaches reveals the true catastrophe. Every new wave washes up more tiny particles of plastic and a multitude of garbage that pose a real threat to the island's abundant wildlife. Volunteers come from all over to try and clean up the shores. But the work must be repeated week after week, the result of decades of carelessness and indifference. The same tsunami that hit Japan in 2011 also washed significant amounts of garbage floating in the area onto Midway. The huge wave flooded parts of the island, carrying many large objects far inland. But biologists are more concerned with smaller bits of garbage, transported here not by water, but by air.
The way that plastic is arriving in the interior is that the adult albatross are foraging 1,000 miles or so from here. They're picking up the plastic because they either mistake it for food or food is attached to it. They bring it back here and they regurgitate it to their chicks. And this happens about every 3 days or so this time of year, and the male and female take turns. And they're feeding mainly squid to their chick. You know, it's really difficult to see, but if we look closely, this could be the point where a little bit of plastic is transferring from the adult to the chick.
At some point, some are able to regurgitate a pellet or a bolus and get rid of the plastic, and others don't get rid of it, and as they die, it remains inside their body. This bird is a couple months old, so should we open it up and see if there's plastic inside? Okay, we'll look inside this one and see what we have. And right away we see plastic, yeah. So here's a couple of larger fragments right there. And yeah, so this bit of plastic is definitely part of a larger piece, and some of the plastic might have sharp edges, and they could actually puncture the stomach lining, so that might be a possible cause of mortality for this chick. So it could be the load of plastic plus sharp edges and then contaminants as well that are part of it.
That's probably from a grocery bag or something, you know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a good chance.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's an interesting piece. We see those occasionally, and we think they're some sort of fishing float, perhaps from Asia, so that's a big item.
Yeah.
Definitely takes up a lot of space. The plastic load in healthy albatross compared to albatross that were found dead, and there was a significant difference, almost twice as much plastic in the birds that died compared to the healthy ones. And so we can't definitively say that plastic kills albatross chicks, but I think what we can say right now is that it is additive to their mortality. Most of the chicks die from dehydration, and so if you think about plastic taking up physical space in the bird's stomach, they have less food, less moisture, and they might be more apt to dehydrate.
Incredible. In 5 or 10 minutes, I collected all this. It's really upsetting. We find a lot of bottle caps and lighters. A lot of lighters. And many floaters like this. They look a lot like what the birds would find. This is a squid without the head. Clearly, they look very much alike. Here's a lighter, and here's a squid. It's not surprising that the albatrosses mix them up.
We see a lot of spacer tubes that are part of the oyster aquaculture industry in Asia or in Japan. So they have these lines that go down, and they have these small little oyster cages. And in order to space them on the line, they have these plastic spacer tubes. And when the line breaks apart, the spacer tubes are all over the ocean. That's pretty common. And I suspect some of the items are so big that they can't regurgitate the pellet. And maybe, again, that's linked back to mortality. If they physically can't get that stuff up, maybe that's another reason why they perish as well. Some of the really surprising things that you find in there, toothbrushes. I mean, you'd think a large toothbrush couldn't be swallowed by an albatross, but it is. Syringes, unfortunately. All sorts of kids' toys are in there, light bulbs, so lots of really interesting things. And if we extrapolate for the entire population, that's about 5 tons of plastic that the adults are feeding to their chicks each year. That's really amazing. Even if we stop putting plastic in the ocean today, it's going to be decades before it's all cleaned up. You know, there's just so much out there. In fact, the gyre where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas. So we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The age of plastic should have been a revolution for the world. But the invention of nearly indestructible synthetic products has instead become a real menace to the future of the Earth's ecosystems.
Once it goes into the ocean, nobody's figured out the appropriate technique to be able to start to clean up the ocean. We basically have to wait until it reaches land. The best thing that we can do is to make people aware and prevent it from reaching the ocean in the first place.
The solution has to start with us, with our use of plastic, but above all, by how we get rid of our garbage. It's not that complicated. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to recycle our plastic.
Il y a des missions qui sont plus difficiles que d'autres. Moi, je trouve que
Some missions are harder than others. Coming here to Midway has been pretty tough. Of course, I expected to see plastic from the oceans, but I never thought I would see so much. I think we have gone too far. The oceans are filled with plastic. Each wave brings more, and there are a lot of waves. It's clear that the presence of humans is felt all over the planet now. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in a good way. Sometimes human nature is pretty hard to understand.
Protecting the ocean's great migrators is still a challenge for scientists. We must take inspiration from our successes to build momentum and create the vital wave of change that will determine the future of our world. Today, the humpback whale is undergoing a population boom all over the planet. In calving areas, like the Dominican Republic, calves are being born in greater numbers, helping to secure the future of this species. The reconciliation between our two species is translating into an apparently shared curiosity. No one who has come face to face with a whale has not come away profoundly moved.
Well, the mother came up kind of unexpectedly too, and I didn't know where to go.
She made a full turn. Mais c'est de voir comment.
It's incredible to see how calm and serene they are.
Vraiment pas le monde de l'humain. Ça sent pas la peur.
You're not scared. You're not scared at all. These are what I call little moments of eternity. They stick in your head, and they're gonna be there forever. It's an amazing feeling.
It was fantastic. I've never had an experience like that before.
Amazing. Amazing.
Incredible. After an experience like that, you can die happy. Incredible.
We have managed to save most whale species from extinction because people mobilized against whaling. We no longer need whale blubber to produce an oil that was once considered irreplaceable. Citizen mobilization may be the salvation of the oceans if we are going to rescue them from the devastating effects of our own consumption habits.
I'm by nature an optimist. I realize it's a very serious problem and it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm an optimist that we can at least stabilize the situation.
Hopefully, over time, we can make some positive change and reduce the amount of plastic that's going in the ocean and reduce the amount that albatross are getting. Because ultimately, it's going to affect you and I and all levels of the food chain. We see the same phenomena. The small fish have plastic in them, the small zooplankton, all these different things. So we need to make a difference.
When industrial whaling ended, there were only about 5,000 humpback whales left. Today, there are over 60,000 in the world's oceans, a great conservation success story. When people mobilize, they can accomplish great things. Today, witnessing the magnificent spectacle of the Earth's last giants is certainly one more motivation to conserve the extraordinary biodiversity of our planet.
Our oceans are facing considerable conservation challenges, but with better science, we are beginning to understand them so we can better protect them. The grand spectacle of life continues in all its stunning beauty, but time is running out if we want to preserve the fragile balance of biodiversity. A biodiversity that allows all forms of life to thrive, including our own.